Hey there, I'm Mark from Spectrum Pulse, and today we're finally going to be talking about the newest project from The Cure, Songs of a Lost World. Full disclosure, I was originally intending this as a short review, as I normally would for legacy acts making returns that get a lot of critical acclaim from diehard fans and generally a positive nod from everyone else, but it's The Cure. And given that their last album came out in 2008, well before I began as a critic, and I haven't really provided any historical context for my background with this legendary band, well, here we are. So I got into The Cure in the very early 2010s. It was around the same time I heard them on an 80s Left of the Dial compilation that intrigued me, sparked an awakening for me with dozens of acts from that era, but I'll also admit The Cure took a little longer to really stick for me, even when I was in that goth scene. Their pop and more dance-ready material generally worked, but I found albums like The Head on the Door and Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me really uneven, kind of overlong, especially for the pop projects. Now, their moodier, more atmospheric material paradoxically tend to work much better for me, where, of course, I love Disintegration, but Faith is probably my favorite album by The Cure to this day. The grooves had more post-punk snarl, they felt a little bit more naturalistic. Pornography is an admirable follow-up, but you really need to get used to some of those drum machines. And Faith was also more contemplative in the grayscale musings. It featured some of The Cure's best lyrics, and admittedly, the lyrics as a whole for this band can be kind of hit and miss for me, and really Faith was lean enough not to overstay its welcome. I respect that. But from there, look, truth be told, my opinions on The Cure don't differ that far from the norm. After Wish, it felt like they fell off a little, with Blood Flowers as better than expected, but it's not exactly great. The 2000s were even harder on them, and then they didn't put out any new material for 16 years. But okay, we got a new album, produced by Paul Corkett, who worked on Blood Flowers, so how did this go? Honestly, about as well as it could have gone, especially as this is a return to the precise balance of shimmering gloss, tinkling pianos, and lush strings arrangements with that wiry churning bass and the hammering live drums that can still capture the melodic hook, but would rather let the mix gently unfold, pull you into all of that gothic angst. Nearly every song takes its time to establish its identity and atmosphere before Robert Smith's haunted yearning comes to the forefront. And if it wasn't for a distinctly modern fidelity, many of these cuts would feel pretty close to songs that The Cure released over 30 years ago. The quality is still here. Hell, on nostalgia alone, it would be effective. The hammering dirge of the opener alone, that fat bass line on A Fragile Thing, the even nastier post-punk snarl of Warsong coming off the funeral keyboards, the creaking melody later echoed in that flattened grind behind the more aggressive drum work of All I Ever Am, juxtaposed with the aching strings of And Nothing Is Forever that's actually really polished, or the heartbroken keys around the sizzling guitar work of I Can Never Say Goodbye. You know what? It is certainly impressive to hear The Cure prove there is a place for the modern evolution of their sound. Wouldn't be out of place. But I will say it is only a gradual evolution, and there are a couple awkward compositional choices, usually around the more programmed percussion. Not all that surprising. Some of the clattering around the vocal punch-ins on And Nothing Is Forever, they don't quite fit as well as they could. Same with some of those fidgety plucks behind I Can Never Say Goodbye. And as much as the acoustic-backed grinding groove of Nodrone was kinda cool, the quasi-industrial percussion and the weedy synths felt a little bit overmixed and honestly oddly dated. Now it takes us to the writing. And look, here's the thing. When you discover that this project was written in the wake of the deaths of Robert Smith's parents and his brother, the latter of whose passing is directly mentioned in I Can Never Say Goodbye, there is this blunt, heartbroken confessionalism where Smith admitted in interviews that he had to pull back some of his performances and writing so it didn't feel just completely overwrought and thus impossible to play live. And thus the album's balance is between that mingled grief and anger and sadness and the weary acknowledgement of age and encroaching death, how it comes for all of us, where love must somehow persist in the face of that inevitability, with traces of meta-commentary across Alone and Endsong, that some of this does feel like the acknowledgement that it's probably going to be the final Cure album, and we need to be okay with that, even if there's nothing after. Now, there is a part of me wishing the writing had a little bit more flair, partially brought on by so many acts building on The Cure's template for, well, decades, and yeah, that's true. but I also think there's a place for understanding the formula done so effectively, and Robert Smith captures the personal tempest of the emotions so directly, kinda hard to nitpick. He sounds great. And in short, honestly, an album like this is both difficult and damn near almost pointless to review. Much of The Cure's historical import occurred before I was even born, and while I have found resonance with this band decades later, it'll never have the poignancy compared to someone who grew up with them in the 80s. And at the same time, I wouldn't exactly say it's a great album to onboard new fans, and those who are already in the nostalgia window, well, for one, they've already heard the album, and they will not have their minds changed by me. So thus, it's a really good, frequently great project, about the best anyone could possibly expect from The Cure decades away from their heyday. A borderline minor miracle, we got it at all, and for many that's going to be enough, but it also feels like a phenomenal capstone to the legacy rather than one that adds a new dimension. So yeah, certainly worth a listen, it's enjoyable, and if you're new to The Cure and you like this, I almost envy you for the wealth of excellent music waiting to be discovered, but if this is to be their Endsong, it's a striking final note. Nothing can take that away from it. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you want to see more, please be sure to like, share, drop comments, subscribe. I'll admit this is a little bit later than I wanted. I actually went back and re-listened to a bunch of The Cure's albums beforehand, and they got a pretty big catalog, and some of those albums really run long, so I really wanted to make sure that I had my own personal context set before I could cover this properly. That's the reason why this is so late, plus a bunch of other things. It happens. And beyond that, if there's anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. Please leave your comments down below where you think this fits in alongside The Cure's larger catalog. It's got to be pretty fascinating. But hey, if you want to help support the channel, given that the schedule is actually closing today for the rest of 2024 before reopening for 2025, links to YouTube memberships and my Patreon are available. And hey, my Discord's still available if you want actually a fun place to go yell at me there. Beyond that, I'm Mark. You're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.